Well, today we begin Boswell's Life of Johnson. Or should I say, we begin the introductions to Boswell's Life of Johnson. I don't think we'll actually get to Boswell's Life of Johnson until tomorrow or the next day. And by the way, yes, I am wearing the same clothes I have for the week. I'd like to say it's because I did the laundry and they're fresh, but they're not. They're the same clothes. I've worn them for quite a few days now. So, today I'm going to be reading the preface to preface, if you prefer, to the 1953 edition. This edition is based on the third edition, 1799, the last in which Boswell had a hand. The books had first appeared in 1791. To the edition in 1793, he made substantial additions. He had continued to collect for further revision, but it was left to his friend Edmund Malone to put his papers in order and to add some explanation of his own. Many things in Boswell's books are obscure today that called for no comment in 1799. Much, moreover, has been added to our knowledge of Johnson, and much to our knowledge of Boswell, especially in the present century. But the accumulation of knowledge has its dangers, and the advice given to the young reader by George Birkbeck Hill in his preface of 1887 is even better advice today than it was then. Quoting what Johnson had himself written in his preface to Shakespeare, Hill advised the novice to read on through brightness and obscurity, and to read the commentary only, when the pleasure of novelty has ceased. It is clearly desirable that the Life of Johnson should be available to readers young and old, with little annotation beyond Boswell's own. The addition of Malone's few notes does very little to distract attention before the text. Well, we'll see about that, huh? Some changes have, however, been made in this reprint, first published in 1904. Errors that have crept into the text have been corrected, usually from the first edition. Misreadings of Johnson's letters have been corrected, if they are serious, in the notes, Boswell's text being unchanged. Fill dates have been added wherever possible in the headlines to each page. The publication of Dr. Powell's revision of Hill's commentary has made it possible to identify the greatest number of the numerous persons who are anonymous in the text. Latin quotations have been translated. Oh, that's a relief. New notes are enclosed in square brackets, although I have been taking Latin online recently, but I didn't have so much luck with the Glastonbury with that. The index has been written in the light of Dr. Powell's sixth volume, and that's from R.W. Chapman. And then we have a note on the third edition. In this edition, a number of small errors have been corrected, some true readings restored, and slight additions made to the index. The need to compress a large book into compendious size means that some anomalies remain and the anonymous persons are not always identified, even though they may be indexed, and Boswell's consistent use of the dash to indicate the conflation of letters of paragraphs has not been restored. Okay. I forgot to read the table of contents, so I'll do that first. We read the preface to the 1953 edition. We read the note to the third edition by J.D. Fleeman. Now we will come to the introduction by C.B. Tinker, the dedication to Sir Joshua Reynolds, advertisement to the first edition, advertisement to the second edition, advertisement to the third edition, chronological catalog of the prose works of Samuel Johnson, LL.D., and then finally, the Life of Samuel Johnson will appear on page 19 and runs until page 1402. And now the introduction. In June 1787, the Gentleman's Magazine displayed on its front cover the following advertisement under the title, Mr. Boswell's Life of Dr. Johnson. The public are respectfully informed that Mr. Boswell's Life of Dr. Johnson is in great forwardness. The reason of it being delayed is that some other publications on that subject were promised from which he expected to obtain much information, in addition to the large store of materials which he had already accumulated. These works have now made their appearance, and, though disappointed in the expectation, he does not regret the deliberation with which he has proceeded, as very few circumstances relative to the history of Dr. Johnson's private life, writings, or conversation have been told with their authentic precision, which alone can render biography valuable. To correct these erroneous accounts will be one of his principal objects, and on reviewing his materials, he is happy to find that he has documents in his possession which will enable him to do justice to the character of his illustrious friend. He trusts that, in the meantime, the public will not permit unfavorable impressions to be made of their minds, whether it be the light effusions of carelessness and pique, or the ponderous labors of solemn inaccuracy and dark uncharitable conjecture. Now, in that section, I don't know if you can see, quite a lot was capitalized that I did not bother rendering unto you, as I have done before in the Glastonbury Romance, because I didn't feel like it. A number of works about Samuel Johnson have been published during the 2.5 years following his death, December 1784. Among them, Boswell's own sprightly Tour to the Hebrides with Samuel Johnson. This was the first fruits of his vast Johnsonian record, which was to prove one of the 7 wonders of the literary world. But though the tour was recognized from the beginning as a unique performance, and though it contained, on the final leaf of advertisement, a detailed announcement of its larger plan, he did not escape very serious rivalry as a biographer of Dr. Johnson. To the puny crew, who thrust upon the public attention the first hasty Lives of Johnson, Boswell can't afford to be indifferent. But there were 2 rivals upon whom he looked with some misgiving. Both of them had specific advantages over him. Both were English, and both could claim and demonstrate a more intimate acquaintance with the great author than could Boswell, who had not even resided in the same city with him. This is news to me. Sir John Hawkins had known Johnson intimately when James Boswell was but a little boy, who had not even heard his name. Hawkins was a fellow member of the Ivy Lane Club, one of the executors of Johnson's will, and the official biographer selected by the publishers of London to write the life for the definitive edition of Johnson's works. The other rival was Hester Lynch Piozzi, who, as Mrs. Henry Thrale, had certainly known Johnson more intimately than Boswell could ever have hoped to do. As the mistress of a house in London and of a magnificent home at Streatham, in both of which Johnson had an apartment appropriated to his use, she had known him in sickness and in health, in his gay moments when he was the pleasantest companion in England, and in those darker ones, when the clouds of madness seemed to be lowering upon his mind. As a woman of great personal charm and of a certain literary ability, she had so fascinated the old man that, after the death of her first husband, the notion sprang up that Johnson wished to make her his wife. To this notion Boswell helped to give what belated currency he could by the publication in 1788 of his most despicable and unpardonable poem, the Ode by Dr. Samuel Johnson to Mrs. Thrale upon their supposed approaching nuptials, dated back to 1784 in order to give it apparent authenticity. The publication of Mrs. Piozzi's Anecdotes of the late Samuel Johnson, LL.D., during the last 20 years of his life, that was published in 1786, was followed after the lapse of a few months by Sir John Harkin's official biography. Both books contained sneers at Boswell. In a postscript dated from Naples, Mrs. Piozzi had specifically charged him with misrepresenting in his Tour to the Hebrides, her opinion of Mrs. Elizabeth Montagu's Essays on Shakespeare. Sir John's attack was at once subtler and more venomous. The only reference to Boswell in the book is the following, on page 472. He had long been solicited by Mr. James Boswell, a native of Scotland, and one that highly valued him, to accompany him in a journey to the Hebrides. Sir John then continues with an account of the islands, quoting liberally from Martin's Book of the Hebrides, published over 80 years before, and making no reference whatever to Boswell's tour, which contained not only the most trustworthy account of Johnson's visit, but valuable information about the islands themselves. The advertisement, which I have quoted at the beginning of this paper, we haven't got to that yet, is the reply of a man who has been insulted by his rivals and wounded in that very part where his sensibilities were keenest. One had accused him of inaccuracy, the other had treated the information which he had gathered and published as negligible. But on looking into these books, he saw at once defects which might be held up to public notice. Mrs. Piozzi's slender volume contained many passages which displayed her anger at Johnson's audacity in opposing, with the full force of his emotion and his vocabulary, her marriage with Piozzi. Her book is therefore characterized as the light infusions of carelessness and pique. Sir John had erred in another way. His stout volume of 600 pages was dull, partly because he was always straying from the subject in hand to incorporate material of an extraneous sort, and partly because his love for Johnson had grown cold. His ponderous labors are therefore described as dark, uncharitable conjecture. Maybe I should be reading that one. It sounds boring. But in spite of his vivid revelation of the conditions out of which sprang the life of Johnson, the advertisement would be worthless were it not for its expression of Boswell's ideals as a biographer. It is clear that a biographer who hopes to become the great practitioner of the art must, in the first place, have at his disposal a large store of materials. This was what Sir John had lacked. It was what James Boswell, the native of Scotland, could supply. Had he not been through long years a collector? Had he not had, almost from the beginning of his friendship with Johnson in 1763, the intention of writing his life? Of this design, Johnson had been well informed, and Boswell had announced as much in that final page of the Tour to the Hebrides, of which mention has been made above. How vast was that store of materials we have now, since the discovery and publication of the Boswell papers from Mahild Castle, some means of guessing, and those who care to pursue the subject will, of course, consult Mr. Geoffrey Scott's volume, the sixth of Colonel Isham's editions of the Boswell papers, entitled The Making of the Life of Johnson. In the second place, this store must be treated with that authentic precision which alone can render a biography valuable. It is not to be forgotten, as the Life of Johnson is read, that its author was a lawyer whose profession required accuracy of statement. As a barrister in Scotland, in Scotland, he was particularly concerned with the preparation, interpretation, and defense of legal documents. He knew the value of the written word as evidence. Litera scripta manet. He had therefore, through a long career, supplied himself with a mass of reminiscence written down soon after the event of conversation described. In the preparation of these, as well as in the continuity of his diary or journal, he had the practice of a lifetime. It is in this practice that we find a union of the two qualities under discussion. He had the ardor of the collector united to the accuracy of the lawyer, both alike directed towards the trustworthy record of life as he had known it. In the third place, the biographer must have a certain affection for the character who is to be the subject of his pages. Ideally, he will not employ his biography to gratify his grudges or air his grievances. He will not be, like Mrs. Piozzi, light and occasionally spiteful, nor like Sir John, heavy and occasionally malicious. Boswell knew his own value. He was aware that his method of writing a biography was the best that had yet been devised. He knew that he had a picturesque subject, that Johnson often displayed the sudden and unaccountable ferocity of a beast, and that he often, with no middle flight, soared above philosopher and sage. What more brilliant subject for a biography? Boswell saw his opportunity and seized it. The result, as Mr. Scott has said, is a book without a precedent and without a detractor. Well, we'll see if we'll be detracting this book. But I'll stop for today. Let's look at ways to go in this introduction. It won't be a while before I actually get to the book, and it better live up to the expectations all these advertisements and whatnot are setting up for it. But until next time, I'll see you. No, I can't say that anymore. Until next time, bye from Boswell. I guess we'll leave it at that. Cheers.